All right, this is
Yeah.
Bleav in Buckeyes. I'm Bryant Browning with All-American cornerback Chimdi Chekwa. We got a special guest with you guys today, a senior editor, awful announcing. We have Ben Axelrod joining us. He's a Buckeye, Columbus guy, in Cleveland now. What's going on, Ben? How are things?
Things are going well. I appreciate having you guys on. Are you guys having me on?
Yeah.
Yeah, you taking over the show.
There's nothing
right at home here.
Chim, how are things your way, man? Before we get
Things
into
are good,
this?
man. Kids are out of school, so I got, a little more on my plate than I want, but everything's going good. It's glad to have Ben on here.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah, like we said, we're just kind of talking. Obviously, we're Buckeyes through and through. We're from the same era here from OSU, and obviously, we're into a lot of the same things. We're into OSU. I'm into the Cleveland sports. I'm into the Browns. I know Ben is big in the Cleveland sports as well. But
yeah, I'm not as big into Cleveland sports.
What? What are you talking about?
Although I will follow the Shedeur Sanders era.
Come on, man.
Depending on how long he lasts.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. But no, man, we wanted to get right into this, man. Obviously, the biggest thing that's kind of been bringing us together is week one for this college football season, right? We have Texas coming in to town. It was announced it's going to be on Fox. I know time is tentative, but we know Fox usually sell a big noon program where they like to play their games. And we're upset. We are upset about this. Yeah. And now we're trying to put our minds together to figure out what can we do to get this corrected. Ben, we're going to kick it to you first because, we want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It feels like it's become an annual storyline when it comes to not only college football, but especially the Big Ten and especially Ohio State, because you look at the schedule last year, 6 of Ohio State's 12 regular season games were played at noon on Fox. I mean, this has become, back when you guys were at Ohio State, it felt like you guys were at 3:30 p.m., 8 p.m. every week. It was like an exception if you guys were at noon. That was like typically the Michigan game and maybe like 2 other games early in the season. Now, like noon is Ohio State's home. And obviously that's something that I don't think a lot of fans are excited about, especially when it comes to these high profile games. You saw last year when Ohio State went to Penn State and Happy Valley, they were protesting it. They were so upset that wasn't a whiteout game at night and you didn't get that big time atmosphere up there. And now with Ohio State, you look at week one, you're hosting Texas. This is like the biggest out of conference game of the entire college football season. And it's just going to be at noon. You guys know what it's like. I mean, to play under the lights at the Horseshoe. I remember I heard you guys talk about that Texas game in 2005. I remember as a student, and you guys played in it, that USC game in 2009. And just that was one of the I've been going to Ohio State games my entire life. That's one of the best atmospheres I've ever seen at the Horseshoe. So to have it be at noon week one, it just feels like it's kind of falls a little bit flat. And as far as like what we can do, like I just think raising awareness and continuing to drum up that that dissent, I think that's a good thing. I think that ultimately puts pressure on Fox to reconsider.
Yeah, I definitely think they're feeling a little bit of the heat because the report came out here recently that, Ohio State was trying to get this game pushed to a Sunday night with Texas, and Texas refused, right? First off, if that happened, I'm assuming that actually did happen. The report coming out about it, it's kind of like, look, hey guys, we're trying here, but ultimately we're gonna have to go back to that noon game. So I think they're feeling some of that heat. But I want to ask you, from your experience just in media, what can they actually do? Like this, they have the noon slot that's been there. They obviously created a plan around that. They want to maximize that opportunity. Clearly, Ohio State obviously is the team that maximizes the viewership at that noon slot. What do you think they can realistically do moving forward?
Yeah, it's really delicate, I think, for Fox because they pay a lot of money for these Big Ten rights. And you guys know, like the biggest piece of the Big Ten rights is getting Ohio State, getting the rights to those Ohio State games. And so it's not a surprise that since Fox has come into effect as a partner, that we've seen Ohio State take up the bulk of that inventory when it comes to the games that they do put at noon. As far as what they can do, I mean, they do have more flexibility than they've let on. They've kind of made it sound like, yeah, it's beneficial to them because they avoid going head to head up against the ESPN windows at 3:30 and the 8 p.m. primetime window. But Fox does have flexibility in this. I mean, they can put a game where they want to on the slate. They just kind of have to move some things around, and they also have to be willing to take on that competition. So I think that when you do have it where it is Ohio State and Texas, one of the biggest games of the season, like, I think that's one where you shouldn't be worried about the competition. You should kind of just take, have the confidence in that matchup, because that is going to be the preeminent game of that week 1 slate.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I'm sorry. Yeah, it's like, I mean, what are we afraid of, right? I mean, are we afraid of, I don't know, South Carolina versus whoever? Like, I think over the last couple of years, we're proving that, the Big Ten brand is as strong as any other brand. Obviously, it's really Big Ten and SEC. I think we're right there. And I think most numbers, we usually, we're number 1, right? So
it feels like the path of least resistance. Like, we could just maximize this slot, make the most from here. And it just seems like the simple pathway to success for them, not considering the fact that, it's impacting those who are the ones coming to watch the game. Now, here's the thing, though. Here's the challenge. If you put a Buckeye game at 1 a.m. in the morning and they play the game in sub-Saharan Africa somewhere, we're all tuning in. I might even go to the game, say hi to some of my family members, go watch the game in person. The reality is the viewers always come, right? And even in my teasing a protest, I wouldn't actually protest watch, right? I'm still gonna watch, right? The pressure I want to put on them is in some other way than not actually, watching the game, right? So they have some leverage here. No matter how much we sound the alarm, they seem like they have some leverage here in that the Buckeye fans will always show up, and then you think about Texas fans will always show up. Is there any realistic pressure that fans in schools may even be better positioned for it, right? That they can put before there's any new deal, new negotiation between the Big Ten and Fox.
Yeah, it's funny because it is kind of that chicken or the egg type of thing where Fox is touted like, look at our ratings at noon. Our ratings at noon have been awesome. And it's like, yeah, because that's where you're putting the games. Like, that's where you're putting Ohio State and Michigan, which obviously that's always going to be at noon, and that plays a big role in anchoring the ratings. But if you put Ohio State, Penn State at noon, people are going to watch. But who's to say it wouldn't do better at 8 p.m.? Who's to say it wouldn't do better at 3:30 p.m.? So I always kind of roll my eyes when I see Fox tout its numbers, because it's like, yeah, wherever you put Ohio State, they're going to do monster numbers. In terms of like the pressure, like, I don't think anything could realistically be done about this Texas game. Like, I think Fox is pretty set in its ways when it comes to what it wants to do for this season. But I do think it's notable that they got such a strong reaction last year to that Penn State game from Penn State fans. And now you're getting that same reaction from Ohio State fans. Like, this has become kind of a headache for Fox, where it seems like, this should be something they're celebrating. We have Ohio State, Texas on our slate, and instead it feels like they have to go on the defensive every time they have one of these marquee games. And so I also think another piece of this is, you would imagine that College Game Day is going to be at that Ohio State, Texas week 1. And so if you have a significantly larger crowd at the College Game Day set, especially with it being Lee Corso's last game, then you're going to have at that big noon kickoff set. I think that causes some further embarrassment for Fox and for Big Noon. But I think ultimately, just as long as like this pressure and this backlash keeps coming, I really do think that it could reach a boiling point where Fox has to reconsider, like, hey, is this worth it every season to have to be defending where we're putting our biggest game of the year? Or do we want to do something that, makes us celebrate it and makes people excited when a game is on Fox, as opposed to being upset about it?
I think Ben just did it. He just set the protest.
He just called it out. We've been trying to figure out the best time to protest, and that's it. Week 1 at the stadium. We're there at the Big Noon set. That's the place. That's the location.
It's the Ben Axelrod protest now too. Like,
I'm an unbiased journalist. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
So, and we're all going to college game day with signs and all types of stuff. We're not showing up to the Big Noon. Shout out to Urban. Shout out to Urban Meyer. But look, Urban, we're leaving you in the group. We're going to show up with Kirk Herbstreit and, and
Lee
the
Corso
other
and
guys
crew with a sign. Like you say, we got to embarrass them into doing things the right way. And
Exactly.
I think that's the best way to do it. But no, I wanted to kind of bring up, like, you just brought up Urban. We know when Urban was at Ohio State, I think he was the most, what I want to say, polarizing figure when it came to, like, really getting his way with certain things, right? And we kind of all hear the stories about, I think recently, he was talking about, kind of implementing almost like a church service type of program there. And if not, if he couldn't get it, he was going to lose his job. I mean, you kind of hear these kind of things from Urban. Now, Urban obviously works with Fox, right? So he can't be too critical of, the decisions that they're making. But what if he wasn't working for Fox? What if he was still under the Ohio State program? Do you think he'll be able to kind of put more pressure on the situation and kind of get the game dictated? Because, I mean, we hurt things, right? We lose recruits coming to Ohio for certain times. They're in certain locations. They just can't get there. Things of that nature are in play when you kick off at noon for some of these huge games.
Yeah, so I covered Ohio State previously. I covered most of Urban Meyer's time at Ohio State. And he was going from Jim Tressel to Urban was such a culture shock in terms of how aggressive he was when it came to recruiting and not just being on the recruiting trail, but the things he would do to amplify every advantage that Ohio State has. You think about, go back to that 2016 Ohio State game. If you look back at it, or the game against Michigan, they're wearing black helmets. Like, they're wearing alternate helmets for the Michigan game because Urban thought it could give them the slightest advantage possible in terms of recruiting to be wearing alternate helmets. And I know for a fact, like, he favored the night games because it gave you a better atmosphere for when recruits were visiting. It gave you more time for recruits who might be coming from out of town to get to Columbus and spend the day in Columbus as opposed to rushing up in time for a noon kick. And so I don't know if Urban would have the power to change this because ultimately you are dealing with a massive TV network and a massive media conglomerate in Fox, but I know he would do everything he could. Like, I know he'd be making every statement, making every passive aggressive comment possible in the media, sending out social media posts, whatever he would have to do, because I do know that having games at night and doing whatever you could do to maximize your leverage and your ability on the recruiting trail, that is something that was important to Urban Meyer.
Yeah, that, and the AD, Ohio State AD, has been reports that, they're trying to improve the experience at the game. I mean, do they get an opportunity to maximize that experience? I'm wondering, like, what games this year do you get the full night game type experience? If I go back to when I played Penn State, we talked about Penn State, right? I honestly don't remember playing Penn State at noon. I'm sure we probably did at some point, but when I played in the game, I don't remember a Penn State noon game. I remember, we lost to them in a close game here in the shoe. Terrell fumbled towards the end of the game. We played there in a whiteout. We may have played a 3:30 game as well in the shoe. I don't remember a noon Penn State, which is just a foreign concept to me. But it seems like moving forward for Fox, it's the thing that, they're just doing what they're incentivized to do at this point. And it seems like the incentives push Ohio State, Penn State, some of these big games at noon. And then the other thing that's interesting is with the expansion of the Big Ten, you have Oregon, you have USC, you have West Coast teams who are playing. When they travel to the East Coast, do those become big noon kickoffs as well, given that it's a 9 a.m. game on the West Coast?
Yeah. I think they could. I mean, we've seen them actually play games out on the West Coast at like 9 a.m. local time to fit into that Fox noon window. I remember when Oregon played Colorado a couple of years ago, they had that game. I think it was 9 a.m. local time there. But I do think that's a part of all of this is you look at the Big Ten and you say, who are the premier teams in the Big Ten? It's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State, and now it's Oregon and it's USC. But the Oregon and USC don't want to be hosting games at 9 a.m. local time out in Eugene and Los Angeles. And so that pretty much from a Fox perspective, like takes those two teams just totally off the slate in terms of scheduling home games for them. You can add Washington and UCLA to that as well. And so I think that's a big reason why you've seen so much of the responsibility really fall on Ohio State to be hosting these noon games, because they've become kind of the flag bearers when it comes to the big noon kickoff time slot. The other part about this that I find interesting is when you guys were at Ohio State, I remember that 2006 Michigan game, they kicked it off at 3:30. And it was like blasphemous that they kicked it off at 3:30 as opposed to noon. And people were wondering, is this eventually going to be a night game? Like eventually it's just Ohio State going to be playing every game at 3:30 and 8 p.m. And it's funny to see the way now it's shifted where almost every game, or at least half the games, are at noon, and fans now want the games to be back at 3:30, be back at 8 p.m. because it does give you that increased atmosphere at the shoe.
Yeah, I think the happy spot is a real mix, right? I mean, a big game like Texas coming to the Horseshoe should be at 9. I think that's like a no-brainer, right? But then sometimes, like, if you're playing Northwestern, yeah, we can kick off at noon, right? Let's not waste time. Let's not waste too much of the day into that game. But a happy mix is where I think things should be. But like we say, obviously Fox is kind of taking advantage to promote themselves at that big noon time. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I appreciate, Ben, you kind of setting up the protest and when it's going to happen and how it should take place. I mean, I think that's what we really needed out this conversation, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what we needed. That's exactly what we needed, because we were trying to figure out how can we actually we're gonna watch the game, right? So what can we actually do? But yeah, man, you leading this protest, we really appreciate it. And so, man, let me ask you: would you consider yourself part of the Lunatic Fringe? You remember the Lunatic Fringe comments from Kirk Herbstreit?
Yeah.
Would you? Because I'm the right now I'm the treasurer
of the Lunatic Fringe.
Of the Lunatic Fringe. I'm the treasurer. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay in that role or not this season. But
new season,
yeah,
they switch up.
Well, if you're the treasurer, then I owe you some dues because I am a card carrying member of the Lunatic Fringe. I mean, I'm not the kind of guy to like post Ryan Day's address to the internet or anything like that. But like,
yeah, that's beyond Lunatic Fringe.
Yeah,
that's something else.
Yeah. But like, I mean,
yeah.
I grew up in Columbus. I went to Ohio State during the Tressel era. I covered Ohio State during the Meyer era. Like, it's actually funny because growing up in the 90s in Columbus, you were not used to beating Michigan. And then come the 2000s, all I knew was beating Michigan. So I have high standards for my alma mater. Like I just have high standards. I think that Ohio State should beat Michigan. I don't like this losing streak. I don't think that's living up to Ohio State standards. So yeah, like I was critical of Ryan Day. I was critical of the program, but I mean, they also shut me up come the playoffs. So like I made a donation to Ryan Day's charity. Like I paid my penance and now we'll see if he can become the first Ohio State head coach to win multiple national titles since Woody Hayes.
There you go.
Yeah,
so how do you feel about Ryan Day now?
I mean, he's a national champion. What can I say? There's nothing I can say. He is the reigning national champion at Ohio State. He proved me wrong. I stand by my criticism because it was right at the time, but he backed it up. He did what he needed to do against Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and ultimately Notre Dame. So I have no qualms with Ryan Day.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I think usually on this show that we tend to support them, right? We're not when they lose. Obviously, they don't lose much, right? And they lose to Michigan. We're not big to kind of go to. All right, we need to start looking at replacements, right? I don't think me and Chim usually don't go there right away, but I think it is safe to say that we still understand the importance of that game, and we have to kind of get that right, get it fixed. Because it's just, I don't know, it's essentially, it's embarrassing. We're talking about embarrassing Fox. It's embarrassing to us when we don't win that game against the team up north. What do you think, them becoming a national championship team and them obviously, going on that streak and coming up against some big games and obviously winning it all, how do you think that helps them get prepared for the Michigan game coming up into this season, and just kind of having that right mindset about going out and getting the job actually done.
I think it should give them confidence. I also think like one thing that was really hard to like rectify when they lost to Michigan this year was growing up my whole life. Like if you lost to Michigan, that was it. That was the end of your season. You weren't competing for a national championship in any other format. Ohio State wouldn't have qualified for a 14 playoff or obviously the BCS. And so it did feel like, especially because, you know, the previous losses to Michigan, I think were kind of equally talented teams, or at least teams who were on the same level. This past year was not this. I mean, this Ohio State team was so much better than that Michigan team. And so to lose to Michigan, and you start to wonder, like, is this just like a mental block for Ryan Day? Like, is this a problem within the program where they just can't get past the Michigan game? And so I don't know if like winning the national title after losing to Michigan kind of helps them get that monkey off their back, where they can say to themselves, like, hey, like we're not playing for our season here in the last week of November, but like we still need to take care of business. We still need to beat Michigan. I don't know, but you would think it could only help winning a national title and, you know, reinstilling that confidence, and also knowing now, like, had they not won the national title, you're probably in a position where Ryan Day's entering 2025 coaching for his job, and all the pressure that comes along with that.
Yeah, and I think at some point, you get a new crop of guys. I mean, it's Ryan Day, but you get a new crop of guys. You get new coaches in. The other team, Michigan, gets a new crop of guys, guys who didn't even participate. I mean, the younger players, but didn't really participate and play in those wins. And then they got basically a whole new coaching staff. So at some point, that monkey should not still be on your back. It's on the head coach's back, right? And I do think the pressure right now is, you know, there's a relief of pressure, right? Because as you mentioned, you know, you're not going into the season coaching for your job. You reach the top of the mountain. You have the respect, and you can really focus on building up. But what happens typically is the pressure is relieved until you get back to that game. And then you can really bring all that pressure back in 1 week. So the hope is that that's not the case. The hope is that, you know, you lock in, you focus, you have a little bit of an approach in preparation for mindset all year for that game, kind of like, you know, Urban did, Tressel did, and I assume Ryan Day does currently. And when you get there, you're just ready to go. Right? You're not the sins of the past aren't weighing on you a week of the game. So that would be the most important thing. I do want to kind of get your perspective on this team, which is a new team, right? Because we had a lot of leaders and a lot of impactful players who pretty much got drafted all in the NFL this year. So you have a whole new group. How are you feeling about this new reloaded Buckeye team, and where do you stack them up against the rest of the NCAA?
I mean, it should be one of the most talented teams, top to bottom, in the country. You just look at, on the offensive side of the ball, having Jeremiah Smith, and on the defensive side of the ball, having Caleb Downs. Like those are two guys who are going to be in the top 5 of the next 2 NFL drafts. So like that alone gives you, I think, some sort of structure and some sort of floor in terms of the talent of this roster. And we know Ohio State's been recruiting at a high level now for, you know, ever, for my entire life, let alone what they've been able to do on the back of this national title. It all comes down to the quarterback, though. And this feels like the biggest question mark Ohio State has had at quarterback that I can remember. Even having Will Howard come in last year, you at least knew he was an experienced guy. You knew he was a guy who had played a lot of reps and done so at a big level or at a high level. They've had, you know, high recruits, lots of talented guys throughout the years, lots of experienced guys. The guys they have competing for the job now, Julian Sain and Keinholz, I mean, they were both high recruits, but neither of them have much experience when it comes to the college level. So that's the question is, can whoever it is at quarterback live up to the rest of the roster and make the most of the roster the way that Will Howard did last year. But I think top to bottom, this should be one of the most talented teams in the country. And like I said, just having Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs and that floor that gives you, I mean, they should be in it. It would be shocking to me if they weren't in the playoff, let alone, one of the favorites heading into it.
Yeah. Gotcha. And one more thing I want to kind of get from you is that, they just made the announcement that they're making another change into the format of the college football playoffs, right? We're no longer just the top divisions get that. Whoever win that division gets the bye. It goes to the top 4 teams in the nation. I guess, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that's fair? And also your thoughts is, do you think that's going to make a better product when it comes to the playoffs this season?
I do. I think that you look at the playoff last year and the way it shook out, where because the top 4 or the teams that got the byes had to be conference champions. And because I think 3 through 8 were all non-conference champions, including Ohio State, that put you in a position where it was Boise State and Arizona State getting the byes. And like Arizona State wouldn't have even made the playoff had they not won the Big 12 title game. And so that created a situation actually where it hurt Oregon, because Oregon's first game had to be against Ohio State. And then it hurt Georgia, who was the number 2 seed, because their first game had to be against Notre Dame, because you had those lesser teams in Boise State and Arizona State getting automatic byes. So I do think this is more beneficial to those teams that earn the top 2 seeds. I do think it's going to create a better product in terms of the matchups that you get, but it does take away kind of a level of unpredictability. It does take away. Last year, you had that awesome Texas-Arizona State game in the quarterfinals. You wouldn't have gotten that. And so there is some push and pull, but I think ultimately, if you're trying to reward, the top seeds in the number 1 and the number 2 seed, I do think this makes it at least more fair for them.
Yeah, I just want them not to make any changes. Just give me 2-3 years. Like, forget about what you feel might be better or whatever. Give it 2 or 3 years, because they're starting to get a little trigger happy in the changes, right?
Well,
talk about 16-team playoff, all this other stuff. So.
Yeah, this is the last year of the contract too, of the current contract. So we're going to see changes next year too. It's probably going to be going to 14 or 16 games. So yeah, it is it's been really chaotic though these last few years, where, even going into the season, like it's hard to even know like what you're playing for or what the rules are going to be, because they just make so many changes year to year. So I feel you on that.
It's so many changes in such a short. I mean, you got transfer portal guys switching. You got the money situation shifting because of the settlement. You got playoffs expanding. It's just wait a couple years. Let's get a good sample size on whether what's good or what's bad, and let's make a real informed decision moving forward. I struggle a little bit with the Oregon got the short end of the stick being the number 1 seed, because look, if you didn't want to be in that position, don't beat Ohio State earlier in the season. Don't beat Ohio State earlier in the season, and that way you could get a more favorable matchup,
right?
Because you got to play the team that you beat, right? And if you thought you were better than that team until you got destroyed, and then you're like, oh well, it wasn't fair. Well, at some point you had to play them to win anyway. So, I mean, I understand that like an Arizona State and a Boise maybe shouldn't have been put in the position that they're in, but their margin of error. Like Boise State's margin of error, whether or not they're good enough to be in that class, their margin of error throughout the season to get into the playoffs is very, very slim. And we've played enough football to know when you have very slim margin of error, your likelihood to make it there is just unlikely. You're gonna slip up and lose a couple games, and you're not gonna get in. Meanwhile, the Big Ten schools and SEC schools, I mean, you had teams in the SEC that lost 4 games that they're like, there's no possible way that these. It's like, you lose 4 games, go home, regroup, raise some money, and go find some more players. But I just want them not to just pause for a second on all the changes. But I do agree that it's probably a better format. But I just want a break.
Yeah. Well, I think Bryant just said it. The real problem for Oregon was winning the Big Ten title game. So you start to wonder, like, are you going to get into a position where teams don't even want to win their conference championship game because it gives them a harder path through the playoff. I think that might have been just as much a concern about it as anything.
Yeah. But Ben, we really appreciate the time. Once again, this is Ben, senior editor at Awful Announcing. Log in on Twitter and find this page. Like it's a great one. They're doing all sports. They're doing all the top things. They're making when people make a mistake, we get them there. When they do something good, we get them there. So it's really a fun page to follow, and we really appreciate it. And also, we'll see you week 1, right, with a sign. What was that? At St. John's Arena, right?
Yep.
When we're protesting, right, and getting things correct for Fox. We'll see you out there. We appreciate you setting that time with us. And then for all the Bleav in Buckeyes guys, please follow our page, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We're here. We're doing shows. We're doing content. We're doing fun things all around Ohio State football as we gear up to defend our national title. And we're going to end this show as always with a nice OH.
Ayo.
Go
There
Bucks.
we go. There we go.
We got a pro.
Class of 2011.
There we go.
There you go. Go Bucks. We talk to you guys soon.
Go Bucks.